So I've got a Revit perspective view that I've set up here, and to perform these steps that I've got written for you in these notes here as well, you'll need to have that as a starting point. So hopefully you all know how to make camera views in Revit, and also how to rename your views. So as you create your 3D views, you can then of course right click onto the view name and then choose rename. And so again, you can see here I've given this name 3ds Max render to the camera view I've created to remind me of the view I'm using to transfer the files. And so it's going to be a linked file, and you don't need to have the Revit file completed, and it's actually going to be a big problem if you leave this process until too late, because you won't have or you'll have too much detail in your file to be able to easily set up the rendering. Whereas if you do it at the beginning, the file will be much simpler and it's much easier to set up in 3ds Max. No, that's the whole advantage of this process. Revit gives you all the materials, and the workflow I'm going to show you, with that you can set up all the materials in Revit at the beginning and all of your lighting as well. But then once you take it into Max, you can reach a point where you've done all you need to with the materials in Revit, and then you can decide to modify them further in Max. But it's a linked file, so you have to decide at which point you're going to do that. And you can also have extra modelling added even after you've finished doing the materials in Revit and started doing the materials changes in Max. You can then still do more modelling, add more furniture and other things to your Revit model, and that'll still come through into Max. And it's clever enough to know to keep the material work that you've done in Max as well as the lighting. So it's a really good workflow. But like I was saying, you can set it up even with a very basic model like what I have here. So maybe I'll just show you the floor plan of that level. So all I have is some walls and very basic bar shape there that I've modelled with an extrusion, and some stairs and other things. So not much detail there. That'll come later. But that's also a good way to approach your projects. Focus on the main elements first, don't get bogged down in the detail. Add that as you refine your designs. And so once you've created a perspective view, you also then need to set true north. And this is another thing people maybe don't think about at the beginning, but it's something you can do almost at the beginning, from the very beginning of your project. So you need to, in the true north view, set the direction that you want for north, so you know which way the sun is going to enter your building. And that's really important, because at first when you start setting up your rendering, you might think you need to do a lot of work setting up your lighting, when in fact the sun is one of the best light sources you'll ever be able to use, and all you need to do is give a direction for north, and that then should give lots of natural light to many of your spaces. And so you do that by going to the Manage tab, and then under Project Location you have the Position button where you have the option to rotate true north. So it's a really easy step, and I've already done it here, but you just need to use the angles that you're given here to set the direction for true north. Really easy thing, but that will make the sun work in an effective way. So then I've just had shadows on there, so I've turned them off just so you can see what it'll look like before you have your shadows. But then when I turn the shadows on, you can see that it's got the sunlight coming into the space based on that direction I've set for true north. And you need to set that by going to Sun Settings on the View Control bar there. You choose Sun Settings, and then you need to choose the option Still up in the top left corner, which will then give you the option of basing your sun on the location, where you can set a date and a time. So I'll just show you, if I adjust the time there, it's going to change the direction of the sun. That's not very good. Let's go to an earlier time. Okay, so by changing the time and the date as well, you'll get different sun angles. So if you click on the sun, in the perspective view, click on the sun button, and then we've got sun settings at the top there.
And how are you sure that it's true north? And how do you change it?
So in that true north view that I just showed you, so back in true north there, under manage, you need to go to that project location panel where you'll find the position button, and then you have the option to rotate true north. So yeah, it's a great option, so then you just need to remember though, with sun settings, in each view you need to choose still, otherwise it won't pick up that that true north orientation you've set. And so the other thing is to make sure you've got shadows on when you're adjusting your date and time, so that you can see clearly whether you're going to get light into your space. So I've done all of those things, and so you can see in the notes here I've given you written step-by-step instructions, so you should just be able to follow through these exactly as I've written them. And then when you're ready to go into 3ds Max, this is the part that's a bit different to what I've shown you before. I've shown you before that you can use these sweet workflows, and you have options for 3ds Max design, interior rendering and exterior rendering, and they're both good, but they can also cause some problems. And so there's another method. If you go to export instead and choose FBX. So by using this method you won't have as many technical issues, and you get a bit more control over the way that your file's updated. It's still a linked file. So under export FBX, first I'll just save the file, and then again export FBX, which is just a file format, and leave the default name. Make sure you know where the file is going to, so I'm saving it in the same folder as my Revit file. And click save. So that's done. Okay, so now you need to have 3ds Max open, and you can have both programs open at the same time usually, and just switch between them. And so under customize, first thing you need to do is go to unit setup. Oh, by the way, I've started a new file, so when the welcome screen comes up, if you have an option, just make sure you choose create new scene, and then under customize, unit setup, and then you just need to check under system unit setup that it's on 1 unit equals 1 inches. Okay, and then set the display units to millimeters, because you're hopefully using those units to measure. So the inches won't show up, but the millimeters will. And then on the main menu, you can go to import and then link FBX. So instead of link Revit does work as well, but again with link FBX, I've experimented quite a bit with this, and you won't have quite as many technical problems. So, so again, there's my FBX file I've just created with Revit. Let's double click on that. And I'm going to change the preset here to combine by Revit family type. And then just click attach this file. Okay, it takes a minute, but trust me, when you've got a bigger file, this will take much, much longer. So again, it's good to do at the beginning. If it asks you any questions about cancelling the current operation, make sure you say no, but it may also ask you questions about creating things like a daylight system, so make sure you say yes to any of those questions. And again, this is all in the notes. So I've closed manage links now, and you can see there's my complete Revit model. And once you see this process, it can make things a lot clearer, because it can seem like you're just going to get one view, when in fact it brings the whole model across. It just uses the camera view to do it. So usually when I bring a Revit model in, I'll type C straight away to set the camera view that I had in Revit. So there it is. Right, so again, just moving through these steps here. So that's again all in the notes there. And so once you have the file inserted, you should save it and then set up the exposure. So I'm just going to save this file. And with 3ds Max, it's good to save in the default location initially. I'll talk to you later about how you can move the files around. But try and use the same computer as well, so that you can easily find the file. So I'm just going to save into the scenes folder here, which is where it comes up. And I'm going to give the file a name. And then under rendering, I'm going to go to exposure control. And just click render preview. So it'll take a minute to render, but on these computers should be fairly quick. So if you can imagine how long this would take to render in Revit, I think it would be much longer and it wouldn't look as good. Okay, so that's done a quick render. We can't see anything because the exposure value is too high. So down here we've got the exposure value. I just need to lower that. And you can see then once I get to about 10 or 11 that I can see light in the interior there. Now because this projector is so dark, it probably looks very dark, but on my screen here I can see fairly clearly that there's a fair bit of detail I can see even in the dark areas. So that's a good exposure value. And I'll just close that now, so that's done. Then under the Tools menu, I'm just going to go to the Light Lister. So this is again another thing you don't have in Revit. It lists all the lights in your scene. Here I have only one kind of downlight. There are quite a few of them. There are 25 of them, but they just come up as one light because they're all the same. Just going to turn those on just by clicking the tick there. So that's done. And then just one more setting under rendering. We go to render setup. And this is one of these secret settings that can help you a lot. When you go to global illumination, I found for interior renders lit by the sun, it's good to increase the final gather multiplier here. So I'll start with 2, and then also I'm going to scroll down and expand caustics and photon mapping. Clicking the plus there. There we go. And just tick enable for photon mapping. So that'll give extra bounce light in the scene. And again, don't worry about remembering this because it's all written out for you in the notes here. And so that's the render settings done. I'm just going to click render. And it'll do a full-sized or 640 by 480 render. There we go. So you can see in the background it's just showing the progress there. Does need to a little bit of preparation, but again, unlike Revit, you see all of these steps. So instead of waiting and wondering why things don't seem to be working, you can see in Max what's actually happening. And so there it's going through final gather, which is the bouncing of the light through the space. So you've got direct sunlight here, but these areas in the background are lit indirectly. So they need bounced light to receive any illumination. So once it's finished that, then it'll go through and start rendering. And again, it should go fairly quickly. So maybe just go back to the notes and show you. So that's essentially what it'll look like, but there I've gone back and increased the final gather multiplier. So what you'll find is that sometimes you still won't have enough bounced lighting, and so you can increase that in 3ds Max. You don't have this option in Revit at all, but in 3ds Max you can increase the bounce light so that the direct light stays the same. These areas that have direct sunlight won't get any brighter, but the indirectly lit areas, all of these areas that are in shadow, will get extra bounce lighting. Okay, so I know, having played around with this scene, that it does need more bounce light, so I'll cancel this. I won't wait for it to finish. And I will go into that global illumination panel again, and at the top, that final gather multiplier, I'll increase to 4. So double again. And then just hit render again. Later on, there's another option to increase FG bounce. As you can see down here in this rendered frame panel at the bottom, we've got FG bounces there, but that'll increase the render time quite a bit, so we'll worry about that later. But you can tell already that this is brighter than it was before, especially in those areas in the background that didn't receive direct sunlight. And that's a huge advantage when you're rendering interiors and you're trying to get natural light to do most of the work. You often need to have extra bounce lighting. So even if it's just for that option, it's really worthwhile using Max to render instead of Revit, because again, with Revit it's very difficult to control that. And really the only option in Revit is to use artificial lights and increase the brightness by sometimes ridiculous amounts, 10 times, 20 times. The original brightness is often what you need. And then you've got to go back and set it to the original illumination level afterwards to get your nighttime renders to work. So that's a lot of work that you shouldn't have to do. Okay, so you can see it's going through rendering there. I've got a few things open, it's going a little slowly, but well, once it gets past this wall has a lot of glossy reflections, so it's a bit slow there, but should get past that and go a bit faster. So yeah, that's what it'll look like in the end. And so then you can set up a nighttime render. And because you can see what it'll look like in the notes, I might just cancel that one and show you the next step. So again, good idea to save the file at this point. So to render without the sun, again, it's fairly easy to set this up in Max. Under Tools, you can go to the Light Lister again, and then turn off the sun, and then also the sky. The sky is a light source. In Revit, it's automatic, you can't turn it off. All you can do is set the time to nighttime, which is a bit cumbersome, but in Max you can just turn the sky off. So the blue sky that you see during the day obviously is something you can see, and that does provide quite a lot of light. So again, I'm going to turn that off, and I'll leave the other lights on, of course. Then again, under rendering, I'm going to go to environment, and this time also turn use map off at the top. So we've got this sky background that again will provide some light, and we don't want that. And then again, render preview, and so this time it'll render just with the artificial lights that I've added. Okay, so again, it's black because the exposure value is too high, so it looks very dark there, not quite black, but very dark. And it's again just to do with the exposure here. If we lower that, you can see then that we have a fair bit of light, but it's a bit washed out because I've left the bounce lighting set to that 4 multiplier. So I'm going to strip that back to 1. Just show you the difference. If I go render preview again, it should give a more natural distribution of light. So it's usually just when you're using the sun that you need to have this multiplier adjusted, but without the sunlight, the artificial light will give enough distributed light so that we don't need that extra final gather. So it should be a bit darker on the ceiling especially, and there we go. Right, so you can see the difference really clearly there. And I might just go down a bit lower to an exposure value of 5 there. Okay, so that's done, and that's set up for nighttime render now. So I'm just going to click render, and this should go faster because I don't have all of that bounced sunlighting. Now, if you're wondering why it looks very orange, it's because of the colour temperature of the lights that comes from Revit. So in Revit, downlights by default are set to be incandescent lights, and you can easily change those to a different kind of light, or just go and change the temperature to a cooler temperature to make it warmer. You can also adjust it with exposure, but I'm going to try and get you to do it with the lighting temperature. Usually looks better, but you definitely want to be aware of the options you have to control it with exposure. So you can see they're rendering quite a bit faster because of the again lack of sunlight. In fact, we only have the artificial lights this time, so I might let this one go all the way through. Again, once it gets past that back wall with the glossy reflections, we'll go through the rest a lot faster. Okay, so I know I've got a basic setup that's going to work, and that's really what you want to set up. Once you get a basic handle on your Revit model, so once you've got some spaces outlined and a little bit of the interior design and some of the interior components added, then it's a good time to start thinking about linking into 3ds Max. And then I can leave that rendering, and I'm going to go back into Revit now and add in some extra elements. So I've actually done this previously, so I'm just going to roll back to that point where I had these extra things. So you can see that I've just got some furniture that I've added to the space, and I've changed the railing here to a different kind of railing because I wasn't happy with the other one. So I just want to show you how you can bring changes that you've made in Revit through into that Max file, and that's the last thing really. So okay, so I've got these changes, basically just that extra furniture and this railing. And so now I'm going to go to, again, Export, FBX, and simply leave it in the same folder where I had the previous file. Click Save, and then Yes to replace existing file. Okay, so you can see Max has nearly finished the rendering. I might cancel that. Again, you'll see in the notes it will show how it should look in the end. So let's cancel that. And so now I want to bring in the changes that I've made in Revit and render with the same settings. So I'm going to go again to the main menu and then references and manage links. So you just need to go to the Files tab, and there you'll find the linked file. Click Reload, and at first just leave the default options on. So don't change anything. Later on you will, but for now just leave those options as they are. Click OK. And it will bring in the changes from Revit. So there you can see it's added the furniture that I had in the Revit file and changed the railing here as well. Any changes you make to your materials and your lighting will come across also. Now here you've got to remember just to press C again to set the camera view again to your viewport. Even though it looks the same, it's actually not set automatically to the camera when you relink the file. And then under Tools, go back to the Light Lister, and you have to turn the sun in the sky off again and turn the lights on, because again it bases those settings on what is set in Revit. So you just need to turn those things back to the way you've had them, and that's done. So now I can just go to Render again, and it will of course render with the same settings that I had just a moment ago, but with these new objects added. And so hopefully you can see once you do a bit of that setup, you can just keep working away in Revit and then add what you need to and link it back in to keep rendering. So that's it. I mean, when you work through the steps, you'll see there are quite a few steps, about 50 or so steps to go through, but if you just work through step by step, you should be able to get your Revit file linked and working with rendering in Max, which will give you far more options than you have with Revit. Revit rendering is very difficult to control, and I know you might be thinking you can rely on the cloud, but the cloud for many people stops working at a certain point, especially when you have a large complicated model, and once the textures stop working with Revit, you can't recover the file, and so you won't have an option for rendering if you're totally reliant on the cloud. Also, using the cloud, you don't really learn how rendering works because it does so many things for you automatically, and so then when you go to render animation, again you'll be in trouble because you can't render animation at all with the cloud. So there you can see it's rendering, and there's my furniture that's come in from Revit with the materials that were set up in Revit there. So you can see all of that has materials. It's all automatically done from Revit. So I might finish that there, but again, just make sure you have an attempt at working through those steps over the next week or so, and so I'll help you to make more progress on your Revit file as well, of course, this week. So hopefully you'll have something to work with fairly soon as well, if you don't already.